This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of The Express. And I want to thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We've got a great show for you tonight. I know that Michael is on the line. And before we get to Michael and his introduction, I just want to remind people how to stay in touch with me through Facebook at Gary Allen, A-L-A-N. You can also go and listen to some of our past programs on YouTube.com, Gary Allen, The Express Interviews. You're going to first get the country western guy, and you'll just look down a little tiny bit, and you'll see in blue lettering kind of you'll see, Gary Allen, The Express Interviews, and you go right there and you can take care of it. This program, like all our programs, are repeated on Thursday night on diversitybroadcastingnetwork.com at 7 o'clock, as well as on progressivevoices.com, which I'm very pleased to be part of what's going on there. Before I get to my guest tonight, there's a few little things that I would like to sort of talk about a little bit. This past week, we've lost a number of performers, one of them being Patty Duke today at the age of 69 years old. I remember that young lady when she was just a little girl. But I also want to pay homage and pay my respects to Ken Howard, who was a friend of this program's. He was on with us about 8 or 9 months ago. It's too bad we don't have a recording of that show. We did lose it somewhere along the line. Ken was always very nice to me. When I got on the phone, we always talked acting, and he was always one of the great gentlemen that I had a pleasure of getting to know over a period of time. The late Gary Shandling, who I never had an opportunity to meet, and I don't know if Michael ever met him, but I'll ask him that in a couple of minutes. He has passed away as well, mysteriously passing away at the age of 66 years old. And the baseball legend, as it were, Mr. Joe Garagiola. He wasn't the greatest ball player that ever played. As a matter of fact, his old comedy line, because he grew up with Yogi Berra in St. Louis, was that he wasn't even the best catcher in his block, which would be Yogi Berra, who he was referring to. So those folks have passed and have gone on to their greater reward, but they will all be missed for the contributions that they made to this world in one way or another. And again, I just want to thank all of you, and Randy out there especially. I hope Vicki Rossman is listening in tonight, because if it wasn't for Vicki, I would not know this extraordinary gentleman that is joining us tonight as my guest. Michael Dane has successfully avoided real work for most of his adult life, which includes probably right up until right now. And he has been a writer since the 4th grade, where his mother said to him after reading one of his stories, "You should be a writer." Instead, he did stand-up comedy, performing high-energy, interactive, smart comedy for over 25 years. From San Diego to Maine, from Seattle to Key West, he appeared regularly at the Comedy Store in Hollywood, which probably tells me that he probably did meet Gary at one time, and played comic relief in Miami. In addition, Dane performed on a frozen lake for an opening of an ice fishing season, at a synagogue for Purim, and at Oxnard Strawberry Festival. Surprisingly, none of these gigs led him to an HBO special or a late-night talk show. However, he did write a book, which he was on this show a couple of times about, which I always got a kick out of. Does This Taste Funny? A half-baked look at food and foodies, which was a remarkable way for this gentleman to introduce himself to cooking, as he said later in his life. But Michael Dane rejoins us tonight again. He's on this show with his new book, Stuck in My Head, an offbeat look at music and mental health. It's a journey of a man's love of music and how it has helped him get through some of the most difficult times in his life, and how it kept his sanity. It is well written. It is a very easy read. It's a book that I recommend to you, as I do the foodie book, Does This Taste Funny? And I am so pleased and proud to not only call this gentleman friend, but to have him back on this program, Mr. Michael Dane. Stuck in My Head, an offbeat look at music and mental health. Michael, welcome.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's good to be back talking to you, but geez, my intro was longer than my book.
Well, that was done on purpose.
Well, I appreciate it. That's all the time we have. Thanks.
Yes, that's it. Did you know Gary Shandling, by the way?
I did not. By the time I was working at the store, we were moving in very different circles.
Yeah. Gary, I never got to meet him either. Will Schreiner said that a very nice but complicated man, a very humble man, but he did have some dark sides to him. So keeping that in mind, I
think he was definitely a brilliant innovator and one of the best stand-ups of my generation.
Oh, he really, really was. And he retired very young. He retired very, very young. Well, let's get to this
Yeah,
marvelous...
In fact, I have to pass this on. One
Yeah.
of the best channeling jokes, because I just watched something on Facebook, a clip of a bunch of his guest performances.
Mhm.
And he does a bit about lying to his girlfriend and how you got to be careful how big you lie because you're going to get caught. I had a hell of a time explaining why I didn't get off that space shuttle. Just a brilliant joke about a topic 1,000 comics have dealt with.
I remember his first joke when he came on the Tonight Show. He walked out, and in his hand, you know the pens that are at banks that have the little chain connected to them?
Yeah.
And he came out and he said, "Oh, I was at the bank today, and do they always give away these souvenir pens?" So
nice.
I got a tremendous kick out of that. Let's talk about this wonderful, wonderful book.
All right.
I was absolutely enamored by it, as everything that you do. It is it's complete. Now I don't know if you're going to come up with another one to follow this up with, but this was so complete.
Well, I hope so. I hope there's more than 2 books in me. I'm sort of hoping this will turn into a career.
Yes. Well, what I meant was another book on music or something like that. I got a tremendous...
There's definitely enough material for another volume for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about why you wrote this book, because it's therapeutic for you to have written this book, because we go through different stages of your life with your great love of music that started very young with your mother and father. And it also helped you get through some of the darkest moments of your life. And if you care to explain to our listeners what those darkest moments were just for a moment, and how music played an important role for you.
Yeah, well, I got introduced to music. My parents weren't terribly musically inclined, but we had a record player and a lot of what you would call light classical music. And then my mom had her favorite singers, and my stepdad, Elmer. I don't like the term stepdad. I usually like to call him, I use baseball terms like a relief dad, because he came when the game was on the line and got the save. Mm-hmm. I think I was much better than stepdad. But Elmer liked Tennessee Ernie Ford, who had that cheerful little ditty about dying in a coal mine, working, carrying 16 tons. He had cheery stuff. Thanks, Dad. And he loved Perry Como, and was just the epitome of mellow back then, 1950s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And my mom liked, for some reason, Eddie Arnold. I don't know how a woman who grew up in Queens ended up becoming an Eddie Arnold fan. He did what's called countrypolitan music. He'd been in radio for a while. You know that genre?
Yes.
Countrypolitan is basically take country and remove all of the grit and cover it with syrupy strings.
Huh.
And that was Eddie Arnold. Great voice, but really sappy records. And my mom also loved Andy Williams, to the point that for years I thought Andy Williams wrote "Oh Holy Night" because I only heard his version every year at Christmas. Mm-hmm. And actually, my mom and I weren't very much in sync about music, but the night Lennon was killed, my mom called me. I was living off campus going to UCLA, and my mom called to tell me that Lennon had been killed, which was really weird because I was sure that she wasn't even that much of a Beatles fan, let alone a fan of John's solo work.
Right.
I'm pretty sure she didn't sing along to Power to the People. And so she called and told me, and I realized it was because she knew it was important to me. It's sort of like, it's what I call the Mike Douglas theory. Mike Douglas had a variety show in the 70s.
Yes.
And he would have really counterculture. He had John and Yoko host for a week.
I remember that.
And I guarantee you, if you watch any clips of that, Mike doesn't really get what they're about.
No.
But he got that they were important. And
yes.
So he gave them the time. And my mom knew that she didn't know any John Lennon music, but she knew John Lennon would be important to me. But it was weird when my mom called and said, "Did you hear who died?" Because obviously my first thought was Andy Williams.
Right.
But no, he wasn't the one. What else? So now I've brought all of your listening audience down. But that's okay. To be fair, my intro followed 3 obituaries. So well, you really set the stage for people for my lighthearted comedy book there.
Well, hey, listen, I'm always there to dampen the party just a little tiny bit. But when what was your as I said, you began to appreciate music at a very young age, like a lot of us do. But you go on to say that for most people, it's just background music, it's wallpaper.
Right, I advocate something that I've actually I'm trying to trademark the name because I think it's very significant. I call it really listening.
Mm-hmm.
Capital R, capital L, trademark. Because when you're really listening, you're letting the music take you someplace. I kind of use the analogy of like a zip line and you grab on. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I try to listen to music. I don't like the idea of music as wallpaper. I can definitely, well, let me read from the book.
Okay.
Naturally, if it's everywhere, it might as well be nowhere. Sorry to drop some Zen on you without warning. For many people, music is only background. It's audio wallpaper, and frankly, wallpaper has never really helped me feel better. For music to be at all therapeutic, I need to treat the notes and the chords like they're landmarks on a trail map, showing me a way to get from the mental wilderness back to camp sanity. It's about telling my neurons to disconnect from whatever is causing the crazy at that moment and latch onto the melody like it's a zip line.
Mm-hmm. What are the crazies?
Well, for me, it's anxiety disorder with just a touch, just a pinch of OCD. But mostly the anxiety thing.
Where does that stem from?
Oh, God, I don't think we have time in an hour show. But really, the book isn't about causes so much as the fact, because causes are sort of irrelevant in a world that I'm suggesting, which is everybody's crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody has some crazy about them.
Yes.
And really, it's just a question of whether it's good crazy or bad crazy.
Mm-hmm.
According to a recent study, over 45 million Americans have a mental illness. And that still leaves us 260 some odd million people who don't, but it is still more than 10% of the population. Mm-hmm. Even at 10%, I think that's low. In my circle of friends, we've got bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, PTSD, depression, OCD, emotional withdrawal, and antisocial behavior. So everybody's crazy.
Oh, yeah. I was discussing this with Vicky today, as a matter of fact, and I don't know if Vicky's listening, but we talked about this a little bit. That
if you're out there, Vic, hey,
most people in show business have some sort of a disorder. When I heard about Patty Duke today,
Gary, you're being too specific. Most people, period, have some sort of disorder.
Okay, well,
There's
I'm just
only two mental states to me. There's good crazy and bad crazy. If you collect refrigerator magnets and spend $50 so that you can get Rhode Island to finish your collection of refrigerator magnets, you're kind of crazy. But that's the good crazy. If you're collecting skulls and Nazi memorabilia, then that's the bad crazy.
Yeah. And I'm afraid that I've known too many people of the second one more than I did of the first one in my life. That's for sure. But, you know, it's like I said today when I heard about Patty Duke. Randy West sent something out on Facebook. I said, I wonder why it is some of the most creative people in the world are the ones that are given a lot of darkness and in their lives, you know. And he just said, well, it's a balance, I suppose. But when you began your love of music, and I know that you started.
By the way, I'm sorry, Gary, I got to interrupt again. I got to let the listeners know every 15 minutes or so that my book really is a funny book.
It is.
In addition to all the deep stuff we're getting into.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that now because you started at a very young age listening to the radio, and every year or so you would get a new radio, and then you started a recording. I believe it was on cassettes.
I've been making mixtapes since well before a mixtape was a thing, a cliche in a movie. But they were mostly for me. They weren't like to get an ex-girlfriend to come back to me or something. They were just for all of my many crazy moods. And because I really believe if you're really listening, trademark symbol, there's very specific playlists for every mental state you might be in and to bring you back to whatever mental state you want to get back to.
Right. And, and for me, I was into jazz and classical music. I had some rock and roll. I'll admit today, rap music just doesn't do anything for me, and country music has never resonated with me in any way, shape, or form. Where did it begin for you? Was it those times when you were listening to music with your mom and dad that you first made recordings from there? Because I know later on you got a library card and you started recording everything you get your hands on.
Well, yeah, I was 11 when Carole King's Tapestry album came out, and the first single I bought was So Far Away. I can still see the Ode Records label on the 45.
It was a good album.
And Tapestry.
Yeah.
Yeah, great album. And so that, I suppose I was influenced a lot by the whole singer-songwriter thing of the early 70s, James Taylor and all that. But what I would do is I realized at the library I could check out albums, and they had music of every genre possible. And so I would just force myself to pick something I wasn't familiar with. Let's try jazz. And, I listened to some jazz until I heard some Ornette Coleman, and then my head exploded because it was just, I could not really process it. I think you have to be a little older to really get free jazz. Because when I was that age, it just sounded like a bunch of guys practicing at the same time. And so I used to, I exposed myself to as much as I could. In fact, even to this day, I still kind of do that in that every year, I don't listen to much radio and I listen to no commercial radio, but every year at the end of the year, I'll look at the top 10 lists of all the different music critics. And I will force myself to listen to each of those songs so that I keep up with what's current. Because I believe, one of my many, many theories, that you stay young by being aware of the pop culture of youth. I've got a friend who has not stopped listening to 70s music since the 70s. I think the most recent album he owns might be 1982. And he's been an old man since he's 30 years old.
Yeah. Because
he hasn't stayed connected to what's changing, what's vital.
I know that you state in your book that you're always listening to music. You always have it on in the background. And it has inspired you over the years to do this or do that. And of course, we're talking about helping you get out some of the dark sides. But let's talk a little bit about some of the chapters in your book that I find fascinating before we get into some of the other meat and potatoes of it. Because some of the chapters and their titles are just extraordinary to me. And these are out of order in a sense because I found the titles interesting. And the nominees aren't. What is that all about? I know it's about the Grammys, but talk to me about where you came up with that title.
I've been a fan of the Grammys forever, and the only common denominator amongst all Grammys fans is we all think every year that someone got robbed and someone got an award they shouldn't have. No one is ever happy with the Grammys. Who watches the Grammys? But we always watch the Grammys. So kind of weird. And hold on just a second. I'm going to go to that article, column, whatever you call what I do. And the nominees aren't. Mind if I read?
No, go.
If the National Association of Public Insurance Adjusters gave out awards and they televised a handful of famous public insurance adjusters giving out those awards on a big stage with a curtain, I would watch. I've never thought the Grammys represented the best in music, but despite the outrageous omissions and ridiculous nominations, I try to catch the Grammys every year. That's because there's always one supremely awkward moment that makes the tedious speeches and bloated production numbers worthwhile. One year, I could swear I watched Rosemary Clooney present an award with Kid Rock. In addition, the husband always feels forced and stilted lately with LL Cool J desperately trying to remind viewers that he, too, used to be in the music business. And so I've watched it, starting in the Andy Williams. There's a common thread. Andy comes back to the book. Andy Williams hosted it in the 70s. That's the first time they were televised, 1971.
Mm-hmm.
Understand, 1971, John and Yoko jammed with Zappa. Brothers recorded live at the Fillmore East.
Mm-hmm.
And Deep Purple got the inspiration for Smoke on the Water. In that year, the host of the Grammy Awards was Andy Williams. So the Grammys have always been just a little out of touch. And in 78, they changed hosts again. So 78's the year that the Dead Kennedys put out their first album, and it was the Who's last album with Keith Moon.
Oh.
So it only makes sense that the host of the 1978 Grammy Awards was John Denver. So, Grammy oversights. Jethro Tull got Best Hard Rock Metal Performance one year.
Mm-hmm.
A Taste of Honey, who only recorded the song Boogie Oogie Oogie.
Oh, yes.
They got Best New Artist the year Elvis Costello was nominated. So the Grammys have a sketchy history, but I still think it's a hoot. It's definitely my favorite award show.
What was the
I wrote
year?
The piece because, I was going to say the capper on it is I ended up writing that piece mostly because I saw a New York Times article a few years ago that said the Grammys are discontinuing the polka category. I thought, this is an outrage. This is an outrage. I must look into this. So.
And I know how important polka is to you. What was the year? What was the year that they wouldn't let Phil Collins sing his own song and was up for the Song of the Year? And their explanation, I think, was so cockamamie. It was, well, we aren't letting the other artists.
Remember that.
Yeah, they wouldn't let him sing. I'm trying to remember the song, but it was up for Song of the Year. They asked him on the red carpet about it. He said, well, he was told that none of the songs that are up for Song of the Year will be sung by their artists or played by the artists that performed them originally. And that turned out to be kind of a bogus thing. He didn't win that year, but, it was just kind of some of these award shows. It's getting to be too many of them. It's getting to be between the Country Music Awards and the Grammy Awards and the Song of the Day.
You're not going to change me. I love them. I'm a sucker for awards.
Oh, no. That's fine. I mean, everybody, we all have our cross to bear, as it were, and yours is award shows. But it just seems like nowadays there's an award for everything. Everything has an award. I mean, I'll never win an award, but that's okay. My mother loved me dearly. Let's go to another chapter. Let's go to another briefcase boy. And the reason I like this one was, and ladies and gentlemen, we are, there is one part of this book that Michael has a number of pictures of some very famous people that they looked back on their life and they thought if they hadn't been this, they would have been a musician. And one of them was Albert Einstein, who said, if I weren't a physicist, I would have probably been a professional musician. And Michael is not only a music lover, but apparently Michael was a member of his high school band, and he was also selected for the All-Star Band for the state of California.
Oh, now, it's true. It's true. Now, there's the caveat with that, though, is that I was 33rd chair in the California State All-Star Band, but I still made the cut. I was at least the 33rd best clarinetist in 1977 in the state of California. So, that's on my CV.
But didn't they also try to persuade you at some point in your career to play another instrument?
Yes, the bass clarinet. Basically, it's the woodwind equivalent of a tuba. It pretty much plays whole notes. It's a lot of Yeah, and so I lasted about a week and went back to the clarinet. Although I was able to be fairly good at classical stuff when I'm reading the music, but I could not play jazz. And that proved to be challenging since I was put in the Dixieland Quartet. And that's sort of a branch of jazz.
Yes.
But I could not improvise to save my soul. So, and that's sort of the key. That's sort of what makes jazz jazzy.
Yes.
Is the improvising.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, so they had to actually write out in music terms on sheets of music paper my solos for the Dixieland Quartet. So I was okay at classical music, but there's a reason I never became a professional clarinetist.
Yeah, well, that's a shame.
But I was surrounded by nerds. That's the bottom line that was great about it.
Are the band people generally nerdy?
Yes, we are. I would say yes, overwhelmingly. I think that I don't use the term nerd as a term of derision, though. No. I love nerds.
Okay.
And I just think that if you're willing to wear a gigantic, tall, furry hat for an hour a day in high school, in that cauldron of social awkwardness, then you've already made a commitment to being an outcast.
But the story that really got me the most, and this is great, folks. All of us remember back in high school, we would have the star athletes that would letter in their athletic endeavor, whether it be baseball, football, basketball, whatever. And I'm with you, because I went ahead and bought a letter sweater and never lettered in anything, thinking I would eventually, but I never did. I played high school football, but I played in a few games, but I never lettered. And I don't know why, but everybody else did. But Uncle Gary did not letter. We're talking, by the way, to Michael Dane, who's written a great book. Wait, hold on. I'm going to give you a plug. We're talking to Michael Dane. Stuck in My Head, an offbeat look at music and mental health. We're talking about his great book. I want to talk to you. I want you to talk about the time that you went out and bought a letter sweater, but you decided you weren't going to letter in band.
Yeah. I bought it because I earned it, but our school, my senior year of high school, they decided it was a good idea for band members to buy letter jackets with musical symbols on them instead of sports images. Mm-hmm. So that's really, really a bad idea, you see, because I could now be identified as a band geek even when I was out of uniform. That just seems like a bad idea. I'm going to get beat up at some point in this story. So I didn't letter in band.
Now, did you go and play band when you went to college?
No, I did not. In fact, sometime in my freshman year, I actually pawned my clarinet. Kind of breaks my heart now, actually. Oh. But at the time, I was in college, and I wanted nothing to do with marching band anymore.
We're going to shift it up now a little bit. You're a little bit older, or actually, you're pretty much about the same age. And suddenly you discovered a hero of mine and a hero of a lot of people who work in radio or people who are just plain demented themselves. You discovered
Dr. D.
Dr. Demento. How did that change your life and your outlook?
Oh, in high school, first of all, I didn't have a lot of friends then, or now, I suppose, but it was odder then. And I kept to myself a lot. I was doing the academic geek thing, and so I didn't go hang out with friends and learn to party or any of that. But what I did do that I thought was at least sort of subversive is once a week I would listen to Dr. Demento's show, and he would play novelty music, and I'd never heard this kind of stuff. Mom and Relief Dad did not have any novelty music in their collections. Mm-hmm. And I loved it because it wasn't accidentally funny or funny because it was bad, or ironically funny. It was just meant to be funny. And some of it was really silly and sophomoric, and I don't care. I cut my comedy teeth on songs like Shaving Green. Remember that one?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about Fishhead?
Oh, sure. Barnes and Barnes with fish heads. And
Dead Puppy?
Skunk and Dead Puppies. There's a theme there, I think.
Yeah.
But my favorite, and I did own the 45 of this at one point, is They're Coming to Take Me Away, Ha Ha. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, by Alan Sherman, I believe.
Well, yeah, under the name Napoleon the 14th.
Yes, I remember that.
And I actually, sadly, frighteningly, can do a little of it.
Go ahead.
Remember when you ran away and I got on my knees and begged you not to leave because I'd go berserk?
Boom.
Well, you left me anyhow, and then the days got worse and worse, and now you see I've gone completely out of my mind. And they're coming to take me away. Ha. They're coming to. I could do the entire song, and that really saddens me.
I wonder if you can find that. Can you find that online somewhere? I guess.
I would assume, but then I assume you can find anything online. That's the world we live in now, Gary.
Yeah, absolutely. How did that help you later with your comedy? I mean, I know you just said a little bit ago something about you cut your comedy teeth on that.
First of all, it showed me, I think, most importantly, that you can get laughs out of anything. I mean, if you watched only stand-up comics that you saw on the Johnny Carson version of the Tonight Show, you'd think jokes could only be about 20 or 30 subjects. But you listen to Dr. Demento's show, and there's everything from fish heads to shaving cream. Uneasy Rider, remember that? Charlie Daniels?
Oh yes. I remember.
Convoy by C.W. McCall.
Oh, God, yes. Breaker 19. Yeah, I remember that.
The Rubber Duck.
Oh, God. Oh, God, yes. You're bringing back way too memories and exploring how old we really, really are. But when did you, I mean, Dr. Demento, isn't he gone now? He's passed on? No,
he's still with us. As far as I know, he does a syndicated version, maybe for satellite radio, of his show, but it's only, I think, monthly. I could be making all of this up, but it's what I vaguely remember.
Okay, let's move on to a little bit older now in your lifestyle, and that's Nature, or the Bee Gees.
Nature, Nurture, or the
Oh, is it Nurture? I thought it said Nature. I'm sorry. Nurture, or the Bee Gees. And here's a funny thing. I used to see the Bee Gees almost every day before Saturday Night Fever hit, and then afterwards, because they lived in North Miami. And when I worked in radio, disco was just coming into its own, as well as FM radio, if you'll think back then. So I used to see the guys all the time at Criteria Music, recording music, and I'd see them here and here all around Miami, only because of the circles I lived in. If I worked in, if I didn't travel in those circles, I would have never met the guys. They were always cool. They were always nice. But let's now talk.
They were nice to me too. I actually met them. I got heckled by Barry Gibb once.
Yeah.
I was doing a stand-up set at a charity fundraiser, and he and Andy, rest his soul, were both involved in it. And at one point, I'm doing my stand-up, and nobody cares because they're only there to hear Barry and Andy sing.
Right.
Opening for any musical act always sucks. That's a rule. Because there's nothing on those people's ticket stubs that says, before you hear the music that you want to sing along with, that's so important to you that you spent money to hear it, there's going to be a dude coming out and talking for like 20 minutes. The ticket stub does not tell them that, and consequently people get cranky.
Yes,
Nature, Nurture, the Bee Gees, or the Bee Gees basically refers to that old psychological theory that who we become is based on either our nature, genetics, or nurture, how we're raised, our environment. And I think there's three things involved. I think the third thing that determines who you become is the pop music that was on the charts when you turn 18. And when I turned 18, it was the year of Ted Bundy and the Hillside Strangler, and Son of Sam got sentenced, and Jonestown happened, and John Wayne Gacy, and also don't forget Garfield debuted. All horrifying things in 1978, and people wanted, I think, fun, happy music.
Yeah. Oh, God, yes.
Fucking mushy in 1978 because the real world was freaking hard.
Oh, yeah.
Things were scary, and we wanted songs about love and dancing, all right? I'm aware that punk existed, but on the other hand, the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever sold 15 million copies, so you do the math.
And, here's the interesting story about that. Many of those songs that were used in the movie had already been on a previous album by the Bee Gees. They didn't just write all of that music for Saturday Night Fever. Many of it, they wrote a number of songs, and they had to do it quickly, or they had to rewrite some songs. I'm trying to remember the whole story, so I may have it a little mixed up here. But I know that 3/4 of the music that was used in that movie was already on a previous album, and when the Saturday Night Fever version came out, it was just re-recording or duplicating the music, and then adding a few new songs in there that they wanted for the movie, and they lucked out with it. I mean, that wasn't the original direction that the directors were going in. They lucked out with that music. Otherwise, the Bee Gees would have just fallen to the wayside, as they said many times, and people would have not remembered them all that well.
Well, here's how significant I think the disco era is. So you want to hear another one of my theories? Of course you do.
Sure I do.
I have a theory. All right. I have a theory is that there have always been scary things going on in the world, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But now half the planet is trafficking in fear. But see, when I was growing up, we might have had our share of global hotspots, but I don't ever remember worrying about a worldwide economic breakdown or crypto-Islamic terrorists. You want to know what I remember from the news in the 70s? Lines at gas stations were kind of long.
Yes.
All right, so my point is that we've always been scary things, and now fear it's like what we sell. It's a commodity. It should have its own NASDAQ symbol. And this is because nobody is writing songs about the boogie anymore, or boogieing, or any boogie-related behavior.
Right.
All right? You need to know that back in 78, this is, off the top of my head, these are the songs that I came up with that had boogie in the title that were hits. Boogie Shoes, Boogie Nights, Boogie Fever, Boogie Wonderland, Boogie on Reggae Woman, Jungle Boogie, Get Up and Boogie, Blame It on the Boogie, and of course, Boogie Oogie Oogie.
Oh, God, you had to bring that one up as the last one, did you? Huh?
Exactly.
And on
a side note, by the way, do you know this, Gary? Whatever happened to the Woogie? In the 40s, they did Boogie Woogie, right?
Yes.
That's a phrase. That's a thing. When World War II ended, did people just give up their Woogie?
Ah, yeah. And my producer EW said
Why
he remembers.
Why did it just become Boogie?
I don't know.
Someone tuning in right now on your podcast thinks you're talking to an insane man.
No.
He's just saying random words.
No. If you, my audience generally is very smart and very intelligent, so they'll pick up on that. But you're right. My producer just also sent me a little note that said back in his day, of course, there was Russia with the bomb and the atom bomb and stuff like that, and we had to worry about that. We weren't worried about China and the Middle East that much, not at all. You know, but I agree with you.
I think the reason we weren't as worried back then is they put music on the radio that had to do somehow with the concept of boogieing.
Yeah, don't forget, EW asked me to remind you, don't forget Jungle Boogie.
Oh, how can I forget Kool and the Gang?
Yes,
absolutely. What a great tune.
Which takes us... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go.
No, you go. No, you.
No, I insist it's you.
Well, now I've lost my train of thought. Did you know weed's legal here in Oregon? Anyway, I'm blanking.
All right, let's move on to the. By the way, you do have a picture, a side-by-side picture in the chapter about the Bee Gees stuff, which has a picture of the late Pastor Jim Jones, that jerk, and the Bee Gees, and your caption is, "Which picture is more frightening?" You know, and I agree with you.
It's a toss-up. It's a toss-up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember the Jim Jones thing because I was still in Miami, and I had a buddy of mine that worked at Eastern Airlines, and some of those people that were being sent home, their bodies were coming through Eastern, because Eastern was the big carrier back then. But let's talk about...
And once again, your show has gone very dark.
Yes, it's dark once again, but we will bring it out of it. Ticket stubs. Your chapter, Ticket Stubs, which I want.
All the concerts I've seen.
Yes, and I've seen quite a few myself. As a matter of fact, I was telling my sister about your book, and she said, well, don't forget about the concert I went to where I saw Jim Morrison expose himself. And I said, did he really expose himself? And she says, well, that's what, from about 10 rows back, that's what it would look like to me.
So she was at the show wasn't that in Miami?
That was in Hallandale at the Gulfstream Racetrack.
Hallandale. Okay.
That was at the Gulfstream Racetrack. Supposedly he exposed himself, and that is still on the books here for a crime in in Florida in general that they never ever wrote it off or whatever you do.
Right.
Just give him a pardon on that thing. But it's still on the books that he was convicted of that. Let's talk about some of your adventures going around seeing different people over the years. One of them,
go.
One of them is a man who just also died, Frank Sinatra Jr. And you saw him.
Let's bring it back to death again. Here we go.
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, I saw Frank Jr. at the Desert Inn before they tore it down. Yeah. Although I'm sure he would have taken a gig there after it had been torn down too. Yeah. But Frank was great. I thought it was really entertaining, but it broke my heart because it was Frank Jr. for God's sakes. I'm still, just genetically still part of some legend there, and he's playing for free in the loungy area surrounded by slot machine pits.
Yeah.
With all that slot machine noise. And he's got a swinging band, and his voice was at least as good as his dad's was at the same age. He was probably in his mid-40s by then. He just didn't have the spark, the thing. Yeah. He didn't have, he had the chops, but did not have the charisma.
You also went to see Mr. Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah, Wayne. I saw Wayne Newton at a great venue up in Minneapolis or Twin Cities area. It's closed now, called the Carlton Celebrity Room. And it was sort of the Vegas-style showroom out in the burbs. And when I saw Wayne there, I was working in the side room where they had the comedy show. And we snuck in to see the main show. Here's a little snippet. I'll admit to a fondness for Vegas schlock. It must, however, achieve a level of schlock that transcends simple cheese and easy camp. If you have the chutzpah to steal a page from Sinatra's book, you can't be lazy about it. Michael Bublé tries to get there, but to my ears, he's not even faux Frank. He's faux Frank Jr. If you want real deal schmaltz, you need someone who has immersed himself in smarmy cliches for so long that schmaltz is part of his DNA. You need to go to a Wayne Newton show. So I went, and it was an amazing experience. It was like a 4th of July episode of HR Puffin stuff.
See, now I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree with you, and I know Vicky does too because we talked about it today. I have worked with Michael Bublé. I like Michael Bublé on a personal level, and I think he's a wonderful singer. He's not really trying to be Sinatra. He's just trying to do his standards, and he does it in his style, his way. Granted, it's not Frank, it's not Sammy, it's not Dean, it's not Tony Bennett, who is another one of my favorites who I've had a chance to work with.
You know what I think it is with Bublé that bugs me is he seems so young, the way he carries himself. It doesn't seem like he fits some of the song choices. Like Frank had a maturity, even a younger Frank.
Yeah,
brought a gravitas to some of those songs that I don't think Bublé brings. He reminds me of a boy putting his dad's shoes on.
Yes,
he's really got nice voice, but it doesn't sound like he's as authentic. That's just my take.
Well, I think Michael brings to music a fun part of it, where I think Frank was a little more serious a singer. Although I did get to meet Frank when I was a young man, and he did have a tremendous sense of humor. EW says he's trying to be Harry Connick Jr. to an extent. Now, I don't like Harry Connick Jr., so you could be right, EW, but I don't think Harry Connick Jr. is even in the same ballpark with a Michael Bublé.
Now, I would say I like Connick more than I like Bublé, and we're going to get really inside baseball here with the analysis. But I think with Bublé, the problem is when he swings, he sounds like he's doing a Frank impression. It doesn't sound like his own swing, whereas when Harry Connick Jr. swings on a record, it sounds like it's him.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like he's copying someone else's vibe.
Right. Well, he has his own style, that New Orleans style of music that he grew up with down there with the family surrounded by music and stuff. And I think Harry's is a good performer. It's just not necessarily my style. I prefer Michael. I've worked with Michael as I have Tony Bennett, and therefore I kind of gravitate to that. Which brings up, by the way, EW agrees with you on your opinion of Harry Connick and Michael Bublé.
EW, you're a man of sophisticated taste.
He'll agree with you on that too. the man who I adore and Frank Sinatra adored, and Frank Sinatra said he was the best singer he had ever heard, a vocalist, is my man, Anthony Benedetto.
Oh, from Queens, where my mom, rest her soul, is from.
Yeah.
So there's a real connection just right there. And it didn't take me long to get into Tony Bennett, but it was a different kind of music than I was used to. Because, I grew up with singer-songwriters.
Right.
Even the Bee Gees music, they wrote a lot of their music. Mm-hmm. And I'm used to singers who only sang being kind of marginalized. Now, I've seen that. I've seen reasons to know that's not the case, where an interpretation of a song is every bit as much art and work and craft as writing a song. I've dabbled in cabaret singing, and that art form, there's some amazing performers who didn't write the song, but they're bringing them to life. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, significant. Well, Tony Bennett brings this stuff to life.
Oh, yes.
He took songs, none of which he wrote, and interprets them like he was acting while he was singing. It blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And then I was watching the show, probably ironically initially, because I thought, this might be too cheesy. But no, I was totally caught up in it. And one gesture from his show sealed it for me. So at the end of I Left My Heart in San Francisco, which he has to do at the end of every concert, right? It's his big closer.
Right.
It's got that line, "Your golden sun will shine on me." Well, when he hit the word shine, he put his hand up in front of his face as if he were blocking the sun. Mm-hmm. And I totally believed it. And so did everybody else watching the show. From
Tony Bennett.
Artist, it would have been laughably cheesy, but for Tony, everyone there bought it. He believed it, so we believed it.
Tony Bennett is one of the most remarkable. He knows how to properly phrase a song. He knows what to do with a song. He's not just the singer. He's a creator of atmosphere when you go to his concerts, because I've worked with him a couple of times. I worked with him in San Diego on the aircraft carrier Midway. I worked with him again in Las Vegas a couple of times. And he just takes a song and he gets inside it and he brings it out and he gives it to you on a platter. And
Absolutely.
That's what a good songwriter will do.
I'd rather not have your listeners think I only go to shows with boring middle-aged to older white men.
No. That was just the ones that I knew.
Some of the concerts. Yeah. Well, let me tell you about some of the other concerts I've seen. Because when I was in college, even though I was a cybernetics major and still a nerd, I actually went to see the Ramones on campus. I saw the Ramones in 1978. Yeah. It was a great show. But I must say, I probably didn't go because I was a punk fan. It was more intellectual than that. I kind of decided it was important I see a punk show. So, I wasn't really connecting with the real reasons I should have been there. It wasn't a gut feeling. But I went, and it was great because I tried to do what I thought was punk. Mm-hmm. And so I tied a bicycle lock around my waist as a belt. And I got to the venue on campus, and they said I had to take it off because they didn't want me stage diving and hurting anyone with my bike lock belt. And so I had to go back humiliatingly to the dorm because I left the key in the dorm room. You see. So, and then I had to sheepishly come back to watch the concert.
Oh, Michael.
So I lost a lot of punk credibility with that maneuver. I really think that hurt me.
Who else have you seen that really surprised you when you thought one thing and it turned out to be something else? Either surprised you good or bad.
Example, Dizzy Gillespie. I did not think I got jazz until I experienced it live. It must be just like NHL hockey. Mm-hmm. I've been told you cannot appreciate it unless you watch a game live.
That's true. That's very true.
Jazz, I think, is the same thing. Well, that makes sense because they're making it up as they go along. You want to hear it when it happens, not when they've done take 15 in the studio. So I'm watching Dizzy Gillespie, but my favorite part of the Dizzy Gillespie story, it really has nothing to do with music whatsoever. Mm-hmm. In the middle of the concert, I had to hit the head. And so I, as discreetly as I could, dodged people in my row and kind of skulked up the middle aisle to go to the bathroom. Dizzy Gillespie stopped the band in the middle of a tune. I'm guessing it was the middle, who knows, and berated me and forced me to sit down again.
Really?
Which I did. And excuse me, when intermission hit, I rushed to the bathroom and ended up peeing right next to Dizzy Gillespie. I could not think of anything appropriate to say in that moment.
Did you Oh, you didn't turn to him and say something then?
No, it seemed like it might be a bad idea to then actually face him while he's peeing.
Who of your heroes? Yeah.
Huh?
Who of your heroes have you seen perform?
Well, it's funny. No one who was a hero before I saw them perform, but Jackson Browne became a hero after I saw him. I was watching him, and he had these. It was a state fair gig, and they had security goons seated at the lip of the stage, facing the audience. And come on, a Jackson Browne concert is not going to draw a lot of thugs.
Mm-mm.
There might be people yelling "U.S. out of El Salvador" too loud or something, but it's not like there's a problem with crowd control at a Jackson Browne concert.
Mm-hmm.
And these thugs were harshing everyone's vibe, and one dude in the front row, misguidedly, stupidly, wrongheadedly, threw an empty water cup at one of the goons. Said goon jumps off stage and tackles this dude, and the other three goons join him, and they're wailing on this guy. Jackson Browne stops the song, pulls his band off stage, and the rest of us in the audience are pissed because we're thinking, oh, great, we're not going to see the show now because I'm one idiot.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently what Jackson was doing was talking to the state fair people about what he could do in this situation. He came back on stage, and he ordered the four goons to leave his show to a huge ovation. And then Jackson Browne played an extra long concert, and it was phenomenal. And he became a hero. But the artists I really want to see, Prince, I've never seen him live. I lived in Minneapolis, never saw Prince live. Dylan, my favorite musical hero. Dylan, I got to talk to you about Dylan at some point. We haven't even hit on the interviews, and it's like tomorrow already.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I can either tell you a little about Dylan, or we can plug the interviews. Or
well, I'll tell you what, you're gonna be back in the not too distant future, and we're gonna talk about a lot of things. Let's talk real quick about Wavy Gravy from Woodstock, because we haven't even gotten to your times in Chicago and listening to some really good stuff. Let's talk about some of the interviews. First, Wavy Gravy. For those of you that are unfamiliar with it, Wavy Gravy was part of the Woodstock fame. Explain to them who he was in the time that we have left.
Well, he's probably most famous for something that he may or may not have said, because that's kind of how 60s history goes. But he allegedly, on the stage at Woodstock, warned everybody to beware of the brown acid, because people were having bad trips on the brown acid. So let me see if I can find that Wavy Gravy piece. There we go. All right.
How did you find him, by the way?
Oh, I wanted to interview him, and I checked around on the web, and he has a website which listed a manager. It's a really no frills website, considering how famous, and I would argue sort of influential, or at least significant counterculture history guy he is. But I found him on the web. I contacted his agent / manager. They said I could get 30 minutes talking to him on this date. And you really don't interview Wavy Gravy so much as you ask him your first question, and then he talks until he's done. And you can tell he's definitely enjoyed some herbal medication in his life. But what's amazing about him is, and I had no idea about this, I knew his role at Woodstock and that he led a band of hippies, but I did not know he's a huge philanthropist. I mean, this guy has donated to, he's founded this society called Seva. And Seva is a Sanskrit word that, let me find exactly the translation. I don't want to paraphrase. It means service to humankind. And their focus is eliminating preventable blindness. 80% of people in the world who are blind don't need to be. In 35 years, they've helped orchestrate 3.5 million sight-saving operations. And that's his organization, SAVA. And, he comes from a fascinating childhood. Albert Einstein lived in his neighborhood, and when his mom would send young Wavy, then Hugh, out for his morning constitutional walk when he was a kid, Albert Einstein took a shine to him and started walking with him. He said Albert Einstein had a very particular smell. And now that sometimes he runs into people, he says, "You smell like Albert Einstein." This is Wavy Gravy, man.
Let's talk. Let's talk about PDQ Bach.
Back when comedy albums could be bestsellers, he was huge. Through the 60s and 70s, he put out a lot of albums. He's a musicologist and a classical composer in his own right. Professor Peter Schickele is his name when he's not performing as PDQ Bach, who is an entirely fictional 17th century composer. And he makes fun of classical music in a very affectionate way, which is, to me, my favorite kind of mockery.
Was he a good interview for you?
They like what they're making fun of. What's that?
Was he a good interview for you?
Yeah, he gave me a surprising amount of time. And, well, it's been interesting, no matter who I've talked to for either of these books, people love talking about themselves, as I may be proving tonight. People love talking about. I talked to the head of the Piano Technicians Guild of America because I went on the web and looked up the food chain in that organization, and I wanted to interview a piano tuner because I thought these guys get none of the acclaim, and yet if you go to see a classical pianist and they are phenomenal, it's partly because of the dude who was there an hour before the concert tuning up the piano. Otherwise, you would sound like crap.
Right.
So I figured these guys never get applause and curtain calls. So I interviewed this guy. He talked to me for an hour, told me stories about the funniest things he's found inside pianos when he's repaired them, like handguns. So, Wavy Gravy, PDQ Bach. I also interviewed my high school band director, who I hadn't spoken with in 35 years, specifically to lambaste him about the whole bass clarinet episode. And found him through his daughter, who I'm Facebook friends with. And I interviewed a woman who plays harp on hip-hop records.
Wow.
And a guy who's in a tribute band, Led Zeppelin tribute band. So I tried to hit a range of the fringe around the music world, because anybody can read interviews with Paul McCartney or Kanye West. And I don't have access to any of those people. So,
Michael, what's the one thing you want people to take away when they read your book?
That music helps, and to me, I've had therapy. I've tried therapy. I've tried physical exercise for getting out of my head. I've got good friends, but when my friends aren't available and my therapist is booked, music has always at least pulled me back to a functional place when I go a little off the rails.
He is Michael Dane, Stuck in My Head, an offbeat look at music and mental health. And I thank you, Michael, for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here. The Express.
Thank you, Gary. Always a pleasure.
You're going to be back. You're going to be back very, very soon, because I want to get into this book even more so. For those of you that have joined us tonight, thank you so much. You can always catch me on Facebook at Gary Allen. Go to youtube.com, Gary Allen, The Express, the interviews to hear some of the past shows. This one will be up in just a couple of days. Thursday night, this program repeats itself on diversitybroadcastnetwork.com at 7 p.m. And you can also catch some of my shows on progressivevoices.com. On behalf of all of us here at The Express, we thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us. Michael Dane, thank you very, very much again. And on behalf of all of us, we want to just say, until next week, please take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.